All right, guys, let's quickly go through the specs of these three axes and then we'll put them to the test. First up here is the Husqvarna multi-purpose forest axe. Then we got the Gransfors Bruks Scandinavian forest axe, and then the latest edition, Hults Bruks Kiza. The little axe that I've had the longest is this little Husky here, and it does not come with this sheath. This is a wet molded sheath that I bought online, but it is much nicer than the little axe mask that you get. The axe mask, of course, is perfectly serviceable. My only issue with it is not that it doesn't have a welt. I don't think that's that important. Just that it's loose. And if you tried hard enough, I think you could remove this, lose it, or let it fall off and perhaps cut yourself. So that's the leather sheath axe mask that you get with the little Husky. The Gransfors comes with a pretty nice leather sheath. It does have a welt. It's riveted together. Most importantly, it's nice and tight. And it has a nice, easy on, snap off removal. Hults BRUK, they just insist on having these weird over-the-top sheaths with this draw cord, which I really don't like. Not such an issue taking it off. It is a bit of an issue putting this thing on. You got that, and then I can't just pull it like this, right? Because it's going to pull that off. So you have to fight that in there and then somehow hold the head and then pull the string. I wish they wouldn't do that, but it does have a welt. It is riveted together, and it is nice, supple, chocolate brown leather. All right. So as far as the handles are concerned, these two have been modified. They all pretty much look like this out of the box, which is to say a really nice piece of lumber. All of them have more or less ideal grain orientation, if that's important to you. Zero run out on the Hults BRUK on this side, a little bit up in this area, but nothing to be concerned about. The Gransfors, which again has been modified in terms of thickness, has straight up and down graining orientation and absolutely no grain run out at all. You can see that the grain runs right through the handle at a perfectly straight angle. That's the perfect handle as far as I'm concerned. The Husqvarna also has acceptable grain orientation, and it has no run out, zero run out. See that? No arrows pointing out of the wood. All right, so the lumber is perfectly acceptable. In fact, as close to ideal as I've ever seen. Again, I can only show you the three samples I have here. I'm sure they vary from axe to axe. The length is slightly different. The Gransfors is slightly shorter. It comes in at 25 inches. The Husqvarna is 26 inches. And the Hults BRUK is 26¼ inches, though once I remove a little bit of that palm swell, it'll more or less be the same as the Husqvarna. All three of these are modern hand-forged heads as opposed to drop-forged, which means they are going to have some imperfections in them, meaning you're going to have some hammer marks and some scaling. That's to be expected with hand-forged heads. If you don't like that, you should probably not be looking at hand-forged heads and go look at some drop-forged axes. All right. While these look the same to a casual observer, there are differences in the head shape. First and foremost, we can see here that all three of them have an ear, though slightly different in geometry. The Hults BRUK has a very small ear, which means there's less space here for the eye of the wood to hold on to. The most extreme dip is the Gransfors, so more eye here, and the Husky is very similar in design, though the eye is a more sweeping shape than this extreme dip we have here. So it should be said that it's my understanding that Hults BRUK makes the heads for Husqvarna, but interestingly enough, they're not the same exact shape. We already talked about the slight differences in ear. but more significantly, the cutting edge is very different. You can see here that we have a much more sweeping, curvy bit than we do on the Husqvarna. The Husqvarna is much more similar in shape, as far as the bit is concerned, to the Gransfors. And let's be honest, both of these axes, that is the Husky and the HB, are copying this Scandinavian forest axe, though not exactly, and that's what I want to talk about, the slight differences. The Gransfors, while they're all about the same size, we have 6.5 inches from cutting bit to the eye, or to the pole rather, that's 6.5, and 6.5, maybe a touch over on the Hults, and we'll talk about why that is in a second. They're all about the same length. The length of the cutting edge is all about the same. We have 3, we'll call that 3.5. We have 3.5, and we have 3.5, a touch under. These are more similar. This has slightly longer cutting edge. However, there's more weight in the pole on the Gransfors. You can see here, I think if I line these up, I hope, yeah, it's difficult to tell, but there's slightly more weight in the pole on the Gransfors than there is on either of these two. It carries a little bit more weight back here, but you can see that the Hults has a longer bit from the front of the eye to the cutting edge. So if you wanted more meat here to file away over time, the Hults might be the one for you. So if we measure these here, we have like 4 inches from the front of the eye to the cutting edge, whereas on the Husqvarna, which is made by Hults, we only have, we'll call that 3 5/8. So less meat to file away on the Husqvarna than the Hults. It's real similar on the Gransfors. We got 3.5 inches from the cutting edge to the front of the eye, because again, they added more weight back here. All right, let's talk the business end. You can see here that the Hults comes with a convex edge, and they put a lot of work into shining this thing up. None of these two come this shiny. So if this is important to you, this is the one that comes with the most fit and finish on the edge. It is relatively sharp out of the box, but sharpness really happens back here, not up here. And this is pretty dang fat. I think I decided this was about a 22.5, somewhere in there, 23 degree convex. So if you want to make this chop, you're definitely going to have to grind away some material back here. That is less the case with the Husqvarna. Of course, this has been sharpened several times, but even out of the box, it came with about a 21 degree convex, and they tend to roll the edges pretty extremely into a convex because they're just doing it on a grinder and a buffing wheel. Right now, though, I have this guy at so we'll call that a 20 degree convex. The Gransfors comes with, or at least mine did, a 20 degree flat grind. This is at now let's try 20, a little bit of a wiggle room in there. 70, yeah, we'll call it about 18 degrees. So somewhere there, 18.5 degree flat grind. And it does take on some micro damage at that angle. I don't know if you guys could see it. It's so minuscule, you almost need a magnified glass to see it, but there's the tiniest bit of rolling or chipping there. I can only speak to the quality of the steel on the Husqvarna and the Gransfors, but again, keep in mind that the Husqvarna is made by HB, so it's probably relatively the same. I find that the Husqvarna steel is slightly harder than Council tools, which I find a little bit on the soft side. So this is a little bit harder to sharpen, but it does, in my experience, hold an edge slightly better than Council tool. The Gransfors is definitely the hardest steel out of these three. They're not fun to sharpen. To file sharpen this, to remove this material, as you will need to, or not need to, but want to, I think to get this to chop even better out of the box. It's a task, that's all I'll say. If you're getting a hand-forged head, you should expect there to be some scaling and imperfection in your axe. If you don't like that, go with the drop forged models. So you can see here, there's quite a bit of scaling in the back here. I've attempted to flatten out the eye because there was a really deep hammer mark here, which I didn't bother to take all the way out. And the pole was not chamfered. I had to chamfer the back of this here. You can see here that that's the case on the HB as well. Again, nice, there's a hammer mark right here, and the edges are not chamfered. Slightly rolled on this, but not chamfered. The Gransfors had the nicest pole out of the box, slightly rounded, which is what you would like want, and something you're going to hammer on, much more like a hammerette, and chamfered on the edges. The Gransfors also has the same sort of scaling, and there's a deep hammer mark right there, so you're going to get imperfections even on the Gransfors. You do have scaling back here on the HB, and you got a deep hammer mark right here and here, and some scaling up front here. Though you can see their temper line here, and somebody's put quite a bit of effort of smoothing this out in this area where they put their stamp. So the fit and finish, I would say, is about the same on all three, though somebody spends much more time polishing the cutting edge on the HB. All right, as far as hang is concerned, this is the one that I can testify to the most. I've had this since 2017, and while it is slightly askew in alignment, it is solid. There is zero gaps to speak of, and I've used this axe the most out of all the axes I've had, and this one has never budged whatsoever. The Gransfors is the one among these three that does not come with any kind of step wedge. They are very confident in their hangs. It is perfectly in line with the bit, and there is no gaps to speak of. I've used this one quite a bit already, and it's not budged as well. I can't say much about the HB other than they have a nice big barrel wedge in there. It is straight and in line with the bit, and there's no gaps that have me concerned that this might wiggle loose over time. I will say that I have another Hults BRUK that's a 3.5 pound felling axe, and it did wiggle just a little bit after a couple months use. I put another step wedge in up front and haven't had an issue since. They're also all three hand hung. You can see here that there's some, I'm presuming, draw knife marks here. They all come more or less like this as well, which is to say they're not quite as far down on the shoulder as I would like. So you can either rasp away some material here like I intend to move this shoulder up further, or you could jump the head down some on the handle. Hults BRUK, Husqvarna, Gransfors. See how deep they bit. Gransfors gets 3 1/4 fingers. Husqvarna gets 3, a solid 3. The HB gets 2 1/4, 2 1/2. Those are piano fingers, remember? But yeah, not that much worse than the Husqvarna, both of which have convex edges. This one is slightly fatter. You can see that just there. More meat to remove on this guy. But once I do that, I know it'll cut just fine. The Gransfors, of course, has the most acute edge, so I'm not surprised it went the deepest. Gransfors. Gransfors, Hults BRUK. Hults BRUK out of the box, Gransfors slimmed down. You can just see how much more flex is in there. Whoa. Doesn't want to stick. Look at that. It bounces. Definitely bouncy out of the box. I mean, you're not going to chop with this thing out of the box. Look at that. Thump. Thump. Just skips. Thump. Thump. Look at that. This does not dig in. I will say you will not have that problem with either the Husqvarna or the Gransfors out of the box. They will chop better than this. That's because of that really steep convex they got. It's like, I don't know, 23 degrees or something. Jeez, beaver chewing it. I will get through it though. Hurting my hands. I know. I hear you guys. I got baby hands. It really depends on what you're looking for and how much money you have to spend. Of course, the Gransfors is the most expensive, coming in right around $200. And then, at least in the United States, it would be the HB Kiza, which is around $120, a little bit more. I understand that you can get those quite a bit cheaper in Europe, and the inverse is true of the Husky. Here, the Husky is like $60 to $80, and I understand it's quite a bit more expensive to get it overseas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. So given that I've had the Husqvarna the longest, let me go ahead and say I love that axe. I use it so much, and I think modified, it is as good as the HB could ever be, for sure. The only edge I see the Gransfors having on the other two is I'm pretty sure that every one you get, the hang is going to be solid on. I've seen a couple of the Husqvarnas that had a really shady hang on it with some nasty gaps and some cracking and whatnot. I'm not so sure about the HB. I think you'll probably get pretty good quality control there as well. The one edge that the Gransfors definitely has, though, is that the steel is harder, and it definitely does take a little bit keener of an edge and holds it a little bit longer. The sheath is the nicest of the three, but I don't know if that merits the difference in the money that you have to spend on it. That's something that you guys have to decide. You know, if you have the money, you know, go for the Gransfors. It's definitely going to edge out the other two a little bit. But with all expensive tools, you get that diminishing return, right? 50% more and 15% better. That's just the way it is. So you have to decide. I'm not here to tell you that the Gransfors is better than the other two, or that you should buy the Husqvarna because it's the cheapest and you can make it cut as well. I could do some more chopping, but you guys have seen me use these axes in the past. Suffice it to say that I can make that HB cut as good as the Gransfors with very little work. It is irritating that you have to thin the handle down so much, but you have to do that on all of them. So yeah, I'm just out here to enjoy myself today and have a little food in the woods, do a little bit of chopping, probably off camera. We've been working weekends to try to catch up, just super busy, so much work ahead of us. Got 3 months of work that I have to get done in about a month. So we'll see how that goes. Everybody always wants done before the holidays, lots of additions and basement remodels and whatnot. But man, I never imagined when my channel was only 100 subscribers strong that I would have several thousands of views on my Gransfors BRUK Scandinavian axe review. And while most of the comments are positive, some people really don't like when you don't like that axe, and I like it. I like it. The video was positive. Damn, Ben, I can't imagine the amount of hate you got on yours when you basically were shitting all over that little stupid forest axe. because I got people taking me to task for comparing it to Nike and saying Nike is using child labor and making axes, and Scandinavian, the Gransfors Bruks is just a small little Scandinavian company making great quality axes, which wasn't my point. My point was that people wear that symbol like they wear the Nike swoosh, but whatever. I got people taking me to task for thinning down the handle and taking off the palm swell. You know, guys, I mean, I'm going to do a video at some point on the difference, handle preference versus ideal handle shape. I do think there's quite a bit of preference involved, but I don't think it's a matter of what size your hands are, or, you know, thickness controls breakness. That stuff's silly. But guys were telling me I took off weight from the handle, so every blow is going to be less efficient because I took off wood from the handle. And you know, these are the guys that just don't use axes. I mean, show me a video of you chopping. That will tell me a lot. I'll have a lot more respect for your opinion if you publish a video of you chopping. That's all I have to say. I welcome comments and controversy. I really do. I don't want to create an echo chamber on my channel, and I certainly don't want to see that on other people's channel where you're blocking people that don't agree with you. But I don't know, man, just makes sense. You know, makes sense if you're gonna critique me. Just makes sense. Better yet, publish a video. Just publish a video of you chopping with that thick chunky handle and the Gransfors Bruks symbol on it, and then you can make fun of, you know, whatever. You can make fun of how I swing, or you can make fun of my little girl hands, or you can make fun of how thin I am, or you can say that I'm an idiot for comparing Gransfors to Nike. There's some other ones too. I can't quite remember all of them. Most of them were silly. I mean, some of them are sensible. You know, there are guys that worry about handle breakage when you thin them down, and yeah, I mean, I guess it's a possibility. I haven't had that experience at all, So, in short, I guess, if you don't have a lot of money to spend on an axe, definitely go with the Husqvarna if it's the cheapest, because it is as good as the others, or you can make it as good. I'm not crazy about the little axe mask that it comes with, but I don't like the HB axe sheath either. So you're paying more because there's more leather on that HB, and you're definitely paying more for the name, I'm sure. So yeah, I guess if you don't have a lot of money, go with the Husqvarna. I'm not crazy about the curvy bit on the HB. I'll say that, especially on that small of a cutting edge. You figure when you overlap your cut there, only a small portion of that curvy bit is actually biting as deep as it can, whereas the flatter bits of the other two, more contact is coming in deeper with the wood. So that's my one main concern with the HB, is that it has that really curvy bit. It is a little bit longer, so you could flatten it and still apex the edge and be about the same length as the Husqvarna, but that's more work. So for as much as I paid for the HB, which was like 130 bucks delivered to my house, I'd rather just spend, you know, an extra $50-60 and get the Gransfors. I know the quality control's there, the steel's a little bit harder. It is slightly better axe in my opinion, but just slightly. So just because of that curvy bit, I would say I'd either recommend the Husqvarna or the Gransfors. All right, guys, that's it. I will see you in a bit, maybe, if I take the camera out the chop, or we'll talk about something else perhaps. But if not, I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, guys, quick update. It's a week later, and I've put quite a lot of work into tuning up this little axe. And I have to report, this steel is as hard as woodpecker lips. Too hard. I could not even touch this with a file. In fact, I can't even recommend this little HB unless you have a belt grinder. I probably spent 3 different sessions, 20 minutes at a time. So let's say a total of 60 minutes. So you got an hour of grinding down this with a 36 grit belt on a belt sander. It ruined my 120 grit belt. I had to change belts mid-session and go down to a 36 grit just to get this thing down to where it would cut. And I left it as a convex, but I hope you can see this is what a true convex should look like a needle point. And then I had to put a secondary bevel on it with diamond stones. Again, a file wouldn't even touch the secondary bevel. And then I resorted to an axe puck, which will cut. As I've said, I have 2 other axes like this that file just won't touch it. You have to use mechanical grinders and or stones, and a lot of that 200-pound monkey just grinding away on it. I've just about got this where I want it. I took a lot of meat off the handle. Still needs some work, but there's no point in oiling this up until you use it once or twice to see if it's where you want it. I think I about got it where I want it. Took a lot off of it, got it flat on the sides here. Mostly flat down here, though I do prefer this a little bit more oval shape to fill up the hand some so it doesn't roll, though that might be a preference. Now I'm just going to hit it with the honing stone. We'll go out and do a little bit of chopping, and then I'll have some final thoughts on these 3 axes. Definitely more sticky with that long sweeping convex, but it does bite a lot deeper. It's not thunk, thunk, thunk anymore. I've actually noticed the same thing with my HB Swamper, the double bit. I put a long, like 17.5 convex on it, which is what this has. 17.5 18-degree convex, and they're sticky, but they bite deep. Donk. Well, I zeroed out, but I'm not quite through. I have to widen it out here. There's another knot. I wouldn't recommend this little HB just because of the amount of work you have to put into it to get it to chop. My suggestion is go with the Gransfors if you got the money. A lot less work. If you don't, and the Husqvarna is much more affordable, go with that guy. It will chop out of the box, and it will cut with a file. Well, guys, until the next one, this is Kevin, over and out. Stay safe.